All right. So I guess by way of introduction, Lauren Killey, fitness guru. What are we? You're doing so much with your life at the moment. So what do you? So I guess it's hard to put you in a box, right?
Yeah, I suppose I'd just say fitness and wellness coach and educator. I suppose. Yeah.
And I listened to your first episode of that. That Never Have I Ever podcast, which well done on actually just getting that off the ground and starting, because that's obviously just so difficult, isn't it, just to get one done, and you realise how much is involved in it once you sort of do it.
Yeah. Jack and I were doing one together for a little while, but doing it sort of on your own, and there's a lot involved in it, and it is really scary kind of going at it alone, but yeah.
Well, it seems like when I listened to the first one there anyway, like you were just, it was almost like unburdening yourself of the, you know, it was just like telling your story. Did you feel that you needed to tell that story, or did you feel that there was a need to be understood maybe about your path to where you are?
Yeah, a little bit, I think. I've got a reputation, I think, for being in the fitness industry as being sort of a prep robot. I don't show a lot about myself and keep things very surface level and seem very just like all this person does is bodybuilding, and that's sort of been it. And don't tend to open up to people in general, and have reached that point in life where I thought it is important to actually start being a little bit more open and sharing things. And, you know, maybe there'll be other people who share similar experiences that feel safe to do so and open up as well by hearing my own kind of like background experiences and all of that kind of stuff. So, and I guess, yeah, I do like the more taboo conversations as in the classiest way possible, you know?
Yeah, definitely. It was salacious. Like it was kind of good listening. I was thinking, and listening to all the theatre stories and all that. Did you find that, how long were you doing theatre for then? Was that 4 years or something?
Yeah, it was about 4 years in the actual degree. And then it's sort of been on and off since then, like in and out of different sort of performance environments. But yeah.
What brought you into that space? Why did you want to go into that? Were you a natural artist or performer or?
No, honestly, no, not really. Like growing up, I was very shy, but I suppose I did like the creative arts. Like I like to write, and as I said, very, very shy, kept to myself. But I think I was in high school, like year 10, and I saw the students do a performance, and something about it, I loved the idea of being able to play a character. And I guess that's what my whole life has been, playing a character. And so that kind of jumped into that, and from there, never turned back. Yeah.
Well, based on the photos that I saw on your Instagram the other day, like it didn't seem like you were real comfortable in your skin. Was it prior to that, or was it?
Oh, I only really started to get, I say, more comfortable in my skin when I was 25 or so. I started theatre when I was 16, 17. So, teenage years and early adult years, very uncomfortable. Yeah.
Have you had anyone look back or listen to that and say? Because when I was listening to it, one thing that I just thought was I found it incredibly sexualized, you know, like with all those things that you were talking about, and just, I guess, for me it just seemed like I said to you before, like I guess I feel like quite a conservative guy now as I've gotten older, but maybe I'm just not cool enough for these things, but did it just seem that like that, and I have done some theatre before, and I guess realising that, you know, when you're talking about the emphasis on getting naked and having to be, you know, I don't know, have you ever looked at that from the perspective of it being anything other than a positive experience?
I see it as quite negative, and I think it was one of those things that was almost an unspoken rule created more from the students than the actual expectations of the degree of the lecturers. And every year, everyone just continued to, well, I need to go that one step further. And over the years, it's just kind of created this like very high level expectation where you come in and this is what you do if you want to make it. And I think the tone of a lot of the even though they were lecturers in a university environment, they were also directors in the performance industry, which was just, well, let it happen. You know, shock factor for shock factor's sake. If that's how this is going to go, let's just see what they do. And it was kind of the industry is difficult, and there will be performances you do where there is very mature and difficult concepts. And so they wanted almost, I think, to see who could handle the difficult concepts. Not that it was an expectation you had to, but who can handle it? Because we did do a lot of the theatre performances, which did touch into some pretty heavy topics. And it was, as a 17, 18-year-old at the time, that was quite difficult to understand. But I guess that was sort of the point. Let's put them into an uncomfortable position to see who has the capacity to deal with it.
Yeah, it seemed strange. That's why I was listening to it going, I wonder if anyone's actually looked at this and gone, this is incredibly unsettling.
Oh, yeah.
Like I found it sort of when I was listening to, and for people who haven't listened to the podcast, go and listen to it. But I guess it just seemed that it had a real sort of, high school camp kind of vibe to it, like, or, like kids misbehaving type of thing. It didn't really seem like, I don't know. It just seemed a bit strange for me. And then I guess wondering if that created any, I guess, further issues in your life from that, or whether you resolved anything from that, or whether you made decisions based on that experience, I
mean, that's a great question. There were certainly things that did occur in that time of my life, which I wouldn't necessarily relate to the degree itself, or what, like the being in that university itself. Just unfortunately, situations around bullying and feeling ostracized, and some situations I ended up in which I really didn't want to. And that comes down to shy little Lauren back then was learning how to set boundaries and figure out who she was. And it did lead to some pretty traumatic experiences, which I think at the time you just don't think about them. It's just, this is the way it is. Get through it.
Is there any of those that you can talk about?
Yeah.
Or is there any examples you can give us?
Of course. So there's an activity, or like a piece that you do in the theatre to like warm up, where you've got to build trust with your fellow performers. And so the exercise was, you got together with a group of people, and one member of that group would just lie down on the floor, and they just had to be limp. They just had to lie down and be a piece of clay, and let the members kind of just move them around and things like that. And the intention was like, gently lift an arm and let it fall down, or, gently lift a leg and let it fall down. So very, very simple, trying to create trust. And unfortunately, in this situation, I ended up with a group who, for whatever reasons, I think they knew I wasn't very good at boundary setting. And so they wanted to see how far they could push things. And so it did start quite simply with lift an arm, lift a leg, and then it became a harder hit, a harder kick, a harder punch. And I was quite very, like, I'm someone that likes to prove themselves. So I was like, I'm not going to be the one to say this is too much. And that did really affect me at the time, because I thought this is an exercise of trust. And I've had that trust completely taken away, because essentially there was just a group of 3 people almost beating on me.
Wow.
And I was thinking, where's the authority figure in this? Like, why are they not stepping in?
I think that's wild. How old were you when that happened?
18. It was about 18 when that happened. Yeah. So to me, like not really understanding the adult world, and I'd been very sheltered growing up, I thought, well, this is welcome to adulthood. I guess this is normal. Yeah.
I think that's such a problem with the whole drawing a line at 18 and saying that almost as though if anything happens to you prior to 18, we'll protect you, and it's it's traumatic and it's abusive, or but anything after 18, well, it's just part of life. And I think that there is a real space for people getting bullied, traumatized, hurt, damaged, upset after 18. And I think, for me, having a 16-year-old daughter, I think of her in 2 years' time, she's still going to be an absolute child.
Yeah.
But I guess, she might be considered an adult by the law, but I know that, there's still a lot of protection that she'll need, and a lot of, I guess mentoring and support. It's not like you just unplug at 18 and you're out there on your own. And it did seem like, I guess, I wouldn't say, I don't want to evaluate your situation for you, but I just, when you were telling all those stories about the things that happened to you in theatre, I found it quite wild,
Wild is a nice way to put it. In retrospect, it was wrong. A lot of it was wrong. It shouldn't have been encouraged, or it should have been discouraged. And I think the shift needed to be, rather than each of the students seeing each other as competition, which was what perpetuated the issue. We're all in competition with each other. So whatever we have to do to survive, it should have been a culture of, well, we're all in this together. We're going into the same industry. Let's help each other to survive. And I think a lot of industries are like that. It's that I will do what I have to do to survive and get to the top, even if it means stepping all over other people to get there. So it's a shame, isn't it?
It is. It is. When you came out of the theatre degree, and what was your path from there to getting into bodybuilding?
Yeah, so I, as most people do, my parents didn't want me to become a performer or an actor. They wanted a safe, secure job. So they encouraged, look, just go and do an extra year of study to get your master's so you can become a teacher. So you've got that as a safety blanket. And so I went on to do another degree, different university, to become an English and drama teacher. But in my final performance in that theatre degree, we had to come up with a self-devised piece. So myself and a few other girls decided to do a performance piece commenting on male toxicity and like the basic negatives of what people perceive men to do, to behave as, all of that kind of stuff. So the stereotypes, violence and gym bros and the I don't know how you feel about swearing on this podcast, but the fuck boy, personas and all that kind of stuff. And the comment of the theatre piece was how these labels make these behaviors worse. By telling someone that they are this, by putting them into this box, they almost feel they have to behave like this. So it's not fixing the problem, it's making the issue worse. So I was given the gym bro stereotype. We had a year to create this performance piece, and I wanted to make sure that I looked the part as well. I was unfit, I was overweight, I didn't go to the gym, I didn't look after myself. And so I thought, well, I better get in shape, because in this performance piece, I'll be wearing a crop top and shorts. And if I don't have abs and I'm not fit, then it's not really going to work, is it? So I went on bodybuilding.com, took the diets out of that, took the training out of that. I signed up to my uni gym and basically did it for the role. But in that process, I kind of fell in love with how it made me feel, because I did lose some weight and got a bit fitter, and I really started to enjoy it. And in doing that, I discovered bodybuilding and discovered the female bodybuilders, and I thought they were just incredible, because I'd always hated the way I looked. I had big legs. Naturally, I'd always had quite big legs and was so self-conscious about it. But these women went out of their way to build themselves to become bigger and stronger, and that completely changed my perception of what women should be, because I thought women were, tall, skinny legs, big boobs, the typical feminine. And that's the opposite. Everything is the opposite to me. So I thought, I'm not feminine. But these women to me were still feminine and beautiful and very comfortable, it seemed, in their confidence and sexuality. So that it was this big mind shift of who I thought I could become. And I thought, well, I can do that. All that is just discipline. I could do that. You just have to keep going. And so I started prepping for my first show whilst I was studying to be a teacher, and started competing whilst I was teaching, and just fell in love with it. So I only stayed teaching for a few years, and I was doing some performance kind of behind the scenes, but I think I sort of had to choose a path. And the path I ended up deciding to go down was the competing pathway. And then over the course of 3 to 4 years, slowly eased out of teaching and became a coach, and just went down that path instead, basically. Yeah.
What did you learn out of that that gender roles project that you had to work on, and what was that trying to achieve by, I guess, was it trying to, I guess, defend those roles, or was it trying to, or was there were you given any instruction, or was it just that was the characters you had to represent, and then you could do whatever you wanted with them?
Yeah, so we had to create everything from scratch. So the concept, the characters, everything. So the whole logic behind it, and the comment that we were trying to make is, there seems to be, and it's a conversation that's still happening now, even though this was over a decade ago, there's issues with violence, abuse, more often in men than in women. And men seem to be just blamed. I don't know if you've heard the whole bear versus man conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. Men
are always the problem, it seems. And it's like, if we see bodies floating down a river, at what point do you look up river to see where it's coming from? When do we go upstream? What's causing the problem? Because at the moment, we're just looking and seeing all these bodies floating by and saying, oh, cool, there's another one. And I suppose that's what this was trying to comment on. By putting these labels and saying, this is just how men are, it's not actually looking to why are these stereotypes coming about? Why are these behaviors, which are quite toxic, not necessarily being
manifesting?
Well, that's right. Exactly. They're manifesting. And that's where we've got to look deeper at relationships growing up with parents and how males are treated, and the fact that there isn't necessarily initiation anymore for males but when they become a man, and what is the role of men now? Things like that. Men as the providers and the protectors versus women who are the nurturers and the mothers. So it kind of started to tap into all of that to bring it back to, if we don't understand why someone behaves the way they behave, we're never going to be able to fix any issues that arise and maybe deal with the toxicity rather than just blaming. Yeah.
So what did you find upstream? Was there anything there?
Find upstream?
It was a bear, wasn't it?
It was a bear. Yeah, it was a bear. Exactly. It's so terrible, that discussion. Now, I think, unfortunately, as much as we came up with the concept, I was a little bit too young and naive to truly understand it, because I would have been about 20 then. I'd only had one relationship in my life at that point, been in the same relationship. I had friendships with men, but I hadn't been through a whole lot of adult relationships, dating, all of that kind of stuff. So from what I took from it was just essentially, don't put labels on, don't blame, try and get to the why. So it started to kind of create this thinking of asking why, not just you've behaved in this way, so I'm going to label you and punish you for it. It's why are you behaving in this way? So I suppose that was the big takeaway, was trying to get to know people a little bit deeper and understand them more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's absolutely what I think. I couldn't agree with you more, that's probably what I see as well, is we have these issues, obviously being a man and being quite a traditional male, but on the generally speaking, I think like I said to my son the other day, everyone's born with the recipe, but no one wants to cook, Well, actually, I could ask you this question.
Yeah.
In your experience, how many people have you ever met that don't want to have a partner and have kids? I was personally looking at that thinking I probably met, and I'm 46, I'm nearly 50 years old, and I'm thinking I've probably met 10 people in my life who don't really have, I'm not saying that all of them have succeeded, but fundamentally I think most people have had that sort of idea at some point, and I think when we add in, social pressures, financial pressures, monetary pressures, media, Instagram, pornography, all these things, we find ourselves way off the path, but the basic sort of recipe for happiness hasn't really changed much from my experience from when I was a child. I mean, I still see the happiest people I know are mostly living the most simple, uncomplicated lives, and the most stressed and worried people are often devoid of those things like stability, be it financial stability, relationship stability, something to devote themselves to, like a purpose, like a child, or a job or an occupation or some sort of higher purpose that's above their own self. It's pretty simple. And I think when you look at those things that you talked about, gym bros, fuck boys, what were some of the other stereotypes you had in there?
Oh, you have the person that overworks, the typical doesn't have time for anyone else, doesn't have time for family because they're too busy working, that sort of stereotype. Then there's the angry, aggressive, violent, that sort of stereotype as well. So yeah.
And when you look at all those, like you say, I think at the further up the river you go, as you were saying, I think that the river would probably narrow and narrow, and you'll find a very common sort of source point in there, be it a failure of some sort or a trauma of some sort, or, some deviation to the path,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is the thing, unfortunately, how our life, the life that's given to us from 0 to 10 is going to form how we are as adults. We're going to have, unfortunately, traumas occur. Most of us do. How badly they affect us and how badly they carry on into adulthood is dependent on the trauma itself and the extent of that trauma. But it's actually very, very simple. And you just have to look at Maslow's hierarchy to know, I guess, the key to happiness, right? Which is all those basic needs, which is that security, family, connection. And as you slowly work your way up from what we need just for basic survival and feelings of safety, then connection, then it's that self-actualization, which is that purpose. And I think that is the one that a lot of people really are missing, is the self-actualization, that something bigger than themselves. And the few people I have spoken to that don't want children, because you're right, I haven't met a lot in my life, but there's a few within the spaces that I'm in, whether it is in the creative spaces or the fitness spaces, the self-actualization is in their sport or it's in what they do. So they still have that greater purpose, but it's when you take someone who's lacking one of these important needs, you know, their security or their connection or that purpose, and it does create more of these issues. So simple in a way, but still a very complicated issue.
Absolutely. How have you found with what you just said there, like you sort of, you know, who you are as a person is, you know, 0 to 10, but obviously from 20 to 30, I guess, you know, in that period here, like you're reshaping the person that you're trying to be. And I know that there are people that struggle with reinventing themselves. What have you done that's different in that space? Like what have you observed that you've got that others who aren't able to change their behaviors or reinvent themselves has got?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the biggest one is it's that self-sabotage that a lot of people do experience. It's the self-doubt. It's the fear of failure. I suppose if I wanted to do something, I did it. Even if it was going to fail, even if it wasn't going to work, I did it anyway. I quit my job as a teacher, even though everyone around me said, don't do it. That's safe, that's secure, don't do it. I quit anyway and found a career that I loved. Competing, which is quite an extreme thing. Everyone around me at the time said, don't do it. You're not going to be able to do it. You're not actually going to be able to get to stage. But I thought, well, I'm going to try. I have siblings who unfortunately have been fortunately very good at things when they were younger. Very good at sport, naturally pick things up very quickly. And as they got older, found when they couldn't pick things up quickly, they stopped trying because of that failure, because of that fear of letting themselves down or just not being able to achieve. And that's put this huge cap on their life. Now what? You know, they're not able to go out for new things. They're not willing to put themselves into uncomfortable situations. And we create this habit of just being in the comfortable. And that's what I see in so many people is just that complacency. I'm just comfortable enough to not need to change. So I'm going to stay here. It's not until we're pushed to a point where we are so uncomfortable that we must change. We lose our job. We have no money. We can't pay the bills. Now I must change. Otherwise, I'm not making quite enough to be really happy, but I'm comfortable. So I'm not going to do anything about it.
I was also thinking how annoying you must be to be around because you've just got that attitude. And I remember what I was going to say is, you know, positivity can really give people the shits.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It does though.
You know, people have a really misguided view of what's enough as well. So when you're saying about these people who don't maybe push themselves enough or don't, for example, with their health, for example, I think a great one is health, where you could look at what people consider healthy today and it is way, way below what healthy is.
Yeah.
And I've got a father who's going through health issues at the moment, and his idea of what was healthy is just so off the track, you know. For example, you know, Coke Zero is a great example, right? Like things like this where people are under this illusion, and that's a massive problem in society at the moment, which you must see that a lot as well, particularly in the health space.
Yeah, it's huge. I think the problem is us as humans, we're wired for the now. I just want to feel good now, and the human body does seek that constant pleasure. You know, it is very hedonistic by nature. But if we think back to how we have evolved, where we came from, we didn't have access to foods. We didn't have access to alcohol, really. We didn't have access to all of the pleasures that we have access to these days. And so the body hasn't evolved to deal with them. So we're very good at getting very complicit with I'm going to just feel good now. I don't care how I feel in 5, 10, 15 years. I'm just not even going to think about it. But it's also a lack of awareness. It's incredible how little people realize the impacts of the food they eat. Like a lot of people don't realize there's calories in alcohol, which is a very common part of society. They don't realize it is quite literally a poison. It's so normalized. And I'm someone that's happy to have a drink as well. You know, I go out, have drinks, have my cocktails, all that kind of stuff. But what it does do to the body is it's ridiculous. And the impact it then has on us physically, mentally in the days and days after, for example, even just having a few drinks, especially as we get older. But that's not common knowledge. And people don't realize they're running themselves into the ground. And if we've got this one life, people believe different things. I believe we've got one. I want to be living it up until I'm 80, 90. I don't want it to sort of end at 40, 50 and then have this last half of my life where I'm just sick and unable to move and unhealthy. So yeah, it's quite unfortunate how many people are suffering.
And I think, that extrapolates across everything, right? The credit card mindset, you know, the wanting it now and then you pay later. It works in health, it works in finance, it works in relationships, it works in everything, right? Would you say alcohol, for me, I can say undoubtedly the biggest issue I've got in my life is alcohol, and I'm not a big drinker, right? Like I just can't stop it. Like I think it's the thing that I would most like to get rid of. How much is alcohol an item for people that you deal with when you're coaching them? Constantly, even with my athletes, because it's a part of human culture and it has been for centuries. So that's a very hard thing that we can't change that opinion overnight. It is social and it is used as a social lubricant and it does make us feel good. It does loosen the inhibitions. So of course it's going to be something difficult to let go from our life. And I suppose in that sense, it's not necessarily addictive, but how we feel when we do have it, it is quite addictive. It's the relaxation, it's the release. So I would say it is super addictive because I think you judge addiction by how hard it is to let go of.
Well, yes.
And I think from that point of view, like I know it's not something that I sit around and think about, but I do get to 5 o'clock and I think, you know, I've had a really great day. I've eaten well. I've been to the gym, blah, 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 blah. And then for me, it's red wine. And I just think, yeah. And I just know that if I could take that out, just that one glass of red wine, if I could just take that out, I think it would be a big difference, you know, but I just struggle with it. I really think, you know, it's really difficult.
It is. I suppose hearing that, my question is it habitual for you? Is it just habit? Because habit is very difficult to break and our body gets very, very used to, if it's coming in on a consistent basis, it's like, cool, where's the wine? I'm used to this, so bring it in. It's just, it's breaking that habit, but breaking a habit is so difficult.
And I think like I can tell that the days I play basketball or if I can arrange my life around being busy in the evening and doing something positive, then it doesn't show up at all, you know, and getting your routine built around something is always the way to defeat it, I think.
Yes.
But it's hard, you know, I consider myself pretty disciplined, but I've noticed that one, and I think it is way more detrimental to our health than people think. And therefore, when people are doing their checklist of all the things they're going to do, and even I know like when people are taking creatine and testosterone and all this stuff, but if they don't drop that alcohol, I think that that's actually probably one of the biggest, you know, things they could do to make a difference.
You're so right. You are. But unfortunately, we're getting different narratives left, right and center. Every other year, there's something different in magazines. You know, a glass of red wine is good for you now. And if you have this much a week, it's better for your health and things like that. So a lot of the general populace, they're getting their information from the media. The media is giving them mixed messaging. So how are they supposed to know? Like, where are they going to get this information?
I've noticed it so much, particularly wine. I've noticed it so much in TV as well lately. I realised that in Friends, you know the TV show Friends, obviously. Yeah. I only really realised that wine is in that all the time. And I actually, because my daughters are starting to sort of pick their way through it. And obviously I always look at things from the point of, you know, what, you know, I guess the conspiracy theorist in me comes out and I start analysing messages in things and all that. And because I was in that transition when, you know, males on TV were represented as strong dads, you know, stoic. They were quiet. They were, you know, just tough guys basically. And then in the 90s, late 90s, we went to The Simpsons, where obviously you got Homer Simpson, and Friends, where all the guys are Seinfeld, you know, single guys, and I watched the masculine figure on TV just disappear.
Yeah.
And you know, we had shows like Growing Pains, The Wonder Years, and Family Ties, where, you know, people would sit around the table and talk about, and one of the kids would have a problem with their boyfriend, and you know, and it was just, you know, Fonzie, Happy Days.
Yes.
Like, so that all changed, right? And right before my eyes. And I always sort of look at it and I think, what happened? It was like a switch was turned, and overnight no one wanted men to be like that, you know?
Yeah.
And of course, you know, I don't say that too often because I don't want to come across as some nut, but it seems that way, right? It looks that way to me.
I don't think you're wrong. Like we have seen this massive shift in the media and in film and TV, and it does dictate. Well, I suppose the question is, you know, is it dictating the masses' opinion, or is the masses' opinion dictating that a little bit? Like we see in Hollywood now, all the movies are being, all the past films, which were fantastic. There was nothing wrong with them. They didn't need to change. Ghostbusters, great male team, remade with females. Wasn't necessary. It didn't need to occur.
You can say that. I can't.
I know.
Forgot about my new toys. Let's go.
But that's the problem, isn't it? You should be entitled to that opinion. But saying it the masses will have your head these days. Why? Yeah. It's a perfectly okay thing to say. Look, there's certain characters that just don't need to be female, because the whole rise of, you know, females trying to be more like men and trying to be accepted. And yes, we needed to see a swing. Of course, there was issues for a very, very long time. I'll say that. But we've swung...
misrepresentation as well, yeah.
Absolutely. But we've swung so far to the other end of the pendulum now, where a man can't have an opinion at all, and women have to be sort of front and center. They have to be the heroes. They have to be the top of everything. But the way it's being done is just copying men. So putting females in these male roles, for example. But there's a reason why there is differences between males and females. There is differences in our nervous systems, you know, there's differences in our roles.
And I think also, like, I mean, I've not really got an affinity with any female characters of the last, I don't know, I can't really think of any, because I am a bit of a movie buff, and I can't really think of any great movie characters. But when I think of great female roles, I think of Princess Leia in Star Wars.
Yes.
She was like amazing, and she was tough, and she was feminine, and she was sexy, and she shot a stormtrooper, and, you know, and then there was, and I know that, you know, I guess feminists would probably look at her as the damsel in distress, you know, and she was chained up, and I don't know, there's probably other things that I don't see in that. And then there was also, my favourite is probably, I don't know if you've ever seen Alien and Aliens with Sigourney Weaver.
Get away from her, you bitch!
You know, she was just kick ass, and I thought that was, and in the movie, she saves a little girl, and she adopts that motherly role with that girl, and she goes to fight the aliens to protect this kid, and I loved all that, and I thought they were great female characters, but I feel like you say, when we reinvent male roles and I guess masculinize females, I don't think that's helping either. It's more about making women front and center and showing how great they are, rather than showing that they can be men.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. They had it right in the 90s and early 2000s in film. There was a lot of fantastic, strong female characters. And the point is, they were doing their own thing in their own way. And the males in that film were still able to also do their own thing in their own way. But what we've seen lately is we've had to demasculinize men to masculinize females. Like, the men are always the damsels, so the females can save them, which to me feels unnecessary, really.
So being in the bodybuilding industry, I guess, and obviously what we're just talking about now, what do you come across people who feel that that's what you're doing? Like in the sense that, you know, you're a female trying to be strong and I guess a traditionally male-dominated sport. What's your, I guess, reception on that? How have you been? How's that been taken?
It's a great question. I think I've been very lucky in the sense that because I'm not necessarily, I'm not too muscular. I'm pretty small in the bodybuilding space, and I compete in the, I suppose you'd say the lower level categories of muscle requirements. So it's still quite a feminine look. So I've had a few comments and things like that across the years of men saying, you know, you lift weights, you look like a man, or if you put on too much muscle, you look like a man. The older generations, like my parents, their opinion is it's a masculine sport. It's for men. It's not for females. Women shouldn't do this. As my arms started to get bigger, I get comments from my dad growing up, which was that's not very womanly and things like that. But that was sort of the worst that I've encountered. So I have been lucky, but I know other people have had negative experiences, and it is still very much seen as a masculine and male dominated sport. It is. And I think what I do experience in that space is a lot of the females do, and myself included, adapt that very masculine way of being, which is very push, very go, 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 not a lot of the typical feminine flow and things like that. And so I think what we do need to see in this industry is a little bit more of that femininity coming in the sense of how females are coached. It is different to men because the approaches up until really the last few years have been the old school male bodybuilding approaches, which don't work for women. And some women won't like me saying that, but they are more emotional. They do need more of that psychological consideration. Their relationships with food are more volatile than most men.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you notice? Like, and I will say, just while you were talking, I was thinking, but like having seen your Instagram as well, like you do have incredibly, you know, well, they're hot, the photos that you take and the, you know, like you do put on the really good looking girl setup as well. So I definitely do see that you're not trying to, you know, like you wear beautiful gowns and you take amazing photos and all that. And so, you know, I think that you are embracing that side of it as well. And it doesn't come across as like masculine at all in my eyes. I was more just referring to like the general, you know, when you're at a party and you say to someone, I'm a bodybuilder, or I'm in a bodybuilding comp next week or something like that, you know, do you receive the negative, which you've covered, you know, but you do find that there is, I guess, men who may be intimidated about that. Have you come across, even with your current partner, like have you ever had a situation where he's felt intimidated, or have you met guys that have felt, you know, intimidated by the fact that you're probably stronger than them?
Yeah, look, in my last relationship, that was definitely an issue, partly because of, you know, what I did and yes, gaining muscle and getting stronger, but also being in a bikini. And then there was the side of things where my partner at the time didn't necessarily want me in a bikini in front of people because he didn't want other men in particular sexualizing me and seeing me in that way. And so there was this battle of, I don't like you doing this because I don't want other people to see you in a bikini, for one, but also, me getting bigger made him feel more uncomfortable. And I think there was not necessarily uncomfortability from my current partner, but he had to get used to it because when we met, I had been competing for a long time. I was in a prep when we met, and he was obviously aware of the bodybuilding world, and, you know, he'd grown up like looking up to old school male bodybuilders and things like that. But a female in that space, it's very different. So I think there was initial adaptation on his part to get used to what I do. He didn't necessarily know what to expect when I said I am a bodybuilder. I think the fears when we started dating would be that I would be the stereotypes. I would get juiced up, get massive, become masculine and things like that, which obviously is not the case.
How do you find, I guess, the sexualizing of Instagram, the fact that like you would notice, right? You put some really good content on there and it'll mean something to you. And I know because I've experienced this as well. And you think it's really great and helpful, and you're really proud of this as an art and a body of work almost. And then I can't do this part of it, but I'm sure you've noticed that like you then put a racy photo on there and you get so much more attention, so much more engagement. And as I said, I don't have that ability, but does that what's that? How do you balance that? I mean,
Yeah.
does that feel great when you get all that attention? Does part of you wish that you got that attention for other stuff? Are you just happy to get the attention?
It's a really good question. Look, I'll be dead honest and blunt. Like, I've been on social media for a long time growing up whilst I was figuring out, realizing that I was seeking validation in external sources. And so for a very long time at the beginning of my career and time in social media, I loved the attention. So would actively, once I noticed, these particular posts would get more likes and things like that, it's like, okay, we'll keep doing that, because that's what's getting the attention. And it took a very, very long time to start to associate the post that I was putting out with actual value, because just because something is getting a like, just because something's getting engagement, doesn't mean it's actually offering any value to anyone. And so over the years, it started to kind of shift a little bit, I suppose, to start to consider, well, what am I actually trying to do? And learning that I'm not trying to seek validation in external things. I don't care if this random person across the world likes this photo. It's about, for me, trying to offer value to the industry, trying to teach, trying to educate. And then obviously to empower as well, being someone that wasn't very confident in their skin. Me, when I was a teenager, would see some of the photos they put up and just be like, no way. I would never be able to be that kind of person. And I know I work with clients and a lot of females who I was, and they want to get to that point where they feel comfortable enough to not necessarily put things on social media, but go and do a photo shoot that they might share those photos with their partner or something like that. So I think it comes just back to that education and understanding of what are we trying to do? Do we actually want to do something with meaning and value? Well, the likes don't do anything. Something I did recently was, it's this terrible opinion that we have in this world, this current world, that the more followers you have, the more valuable you are as a person. The more engagement you get, the more valuable you are as a person. And that carries into the real world in a lot of ways, which is mental to me, that the followers someone has on the internet would impact how people treat them in real life. But I see it. And
I've been at parties. Sorry to cut in. I've been at parties where I've seen people, when someone's walked in, I've seen people look at who it is on Instagram and discover that he's got, 500,000 followers, and then make a beeline for that person.
Yeah.
And vice versa. I've seen someone, not have many followers and be sort of treated like shit. And I think this is just a wild qualification that we have now for people,
It's the world we live in. It is the world we live in, the influencer world. If you've got a lot of followers, you get into places for free, you get given things, you're worth people's time. I see it all the time in social situations. It's high school all over again. You're cool, so you can sit with us, right? And I suppose until society starts to take the power away from that, that's the way it's always going to be. But recently I thought, I want to put value out, so there's no point having all of these followers if they're just there to look at pretty photos. You know what I mean? So I went and just deleted, because you can obviously delete people who follow you. Just deleted anyone that was a false account, fake account, creeper, if you want to say that, something like that, people that aren't actually there to, because my Instagram's my business. Yeah, that's right. And this is how I run my business. It's how I get clients. So it's like, look, if you're never going to become a customer, you're never going to become a client, there's no point having you as a follower, because that number means, in the grand scheme of things, nothing. Because unless you are by definition an influencer and that's how you're making your money, it just doesn't mean anything in this day and age. Yeah.
I know people who have run videos and got millions and millions of views and things like that, and there's no actual money in it, right? So you kind of really, I think the great business model of Instagram is that they're not paying to have their content created, right? Back in the day, a television station would have to pay to make something that you watched, so then they could sell advertising space with it. But now they're paying nothing for that content. You're creating it for free.
Yeah.
And they're getting the ad placements, so it's quite an amazing business model.
They're brilliant. They've ruined the world, but it's brilliant what they've created. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of positives that have come out of it. You can definitely connect with groups you might not have even been into. I mean, without the internet, how would you have got into bodybuilding? Really, like back to when you were doing that that theatre presentation. I don't think just being able to say, you know what, I want to try something, and being able to go bodybuilding.com, meal plans, and I think part of me wishes more people realize that that anything that there is a group out there that they can find, but with access to all this information, it's actually even probably overwhelming for some people that they can even get, better, that they can do more in life, that they can, have a change of situation.
Well, now we've got access to the 1%. Back in the day, before the internet, we only had access to the people in our town, our village where we lived. And
That's right.
that would kind of determine our ceiling for success. Now, because we see the 1%, there's so many people who are, 12-year-old millionaires and things like that. And it is quite daunting. And I think it does put people off, because if there is that fear of failure, well, the self-sabotage is, what's the point of even trying? I'm never going to be this person. Even though a lot of what we see online is also false, fake lives, fake luxury, people hiring cars and designer handbags and clothing to look like they're successful. So it's creating this massive issue where some people feel the need to, if they're not living that life, I'll falsify it. But I could never get to that life, so what's the point of even trying?
Absolutely. It's definitely all about controlling your relationship with it, because, when I grew up, like, if I even think about the girls that I could date, there's probably like 15 in the whole, if I went to a nightclub, there might be 2 or 3 more, it was a real effort to meet a girl. And therefore you really valued, that. And it was, you might see a girl one day and then have the courage to talk to her the next, and then go to a bar and hope she came back again. And, and it was really, you would really have a value in that connection, and I think that is probably one of the most scary things, especially with kids. I worry about, I mean, we talk about this a lot at home, but, I think the idea of, being able to replace people with either swiping or just, moving on and devaluing, it's like everything, it's supply and demand, basic economics. When there's a scarcity of something, you value it more. And when we have this abundance, and then the other thing we have is that, as it's commonly said, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
We used to compare ourselves to the neighbours, or you'd compare yourself to maybe some kid at your school, but now you're literally comparing yourself with the whole world, which, really can be something that takes the wind out of your sails.
Yeah, absolutely, because the world is masking the actual reality of what's going on, and we're not having the conversations that need to come along with that, which is the realities of relationships, the realities of the importance of trust and communication, and the fact that you'll constantly be seeking it's called, the term we use is new relationship energy, NRE, which is that the honeymoon phase, most people call
buzz,
it, right?
Yeah.
The buzz, right?
It happens
Constant
with guys as
seeking
well. It doesn't have to be it happens with just when you meet a new friend, right? Like, even if it's not a sexual one, like you meet someone, you get that, hey, this guy likes me, or that, we hit it off. It's a great feeling.
It is. And I think the issue is people go seeking it constantly in romantic relationships. They don't necessarily have the understanding of the effort and work that is required for an ongoing relationship. And because there's so much easy access, like you said, it's easier to just go, all right, next. Let's find another one. This has become too difficult.
It's wild. And I guess, how did you, when you were sort of learning all this sort of stuff and you got into, one of the things you talked about in your podcast was just this, the sexuality awakening, I guess, in your parlance. What would you, how did you get comfortable talking about that, especially knowing that your family and friends are going to listen? A lot of people, I think, need to have those sort of conversations and talk about what they're actually feeling and this sexuality being part of their whole health. What gave you the courage to bring that up, I guess?
I think people make jokes about the fact that once you hit 30, you stop caring what people think and you start speaking more openly. And part of it is, as I've gotten older and started to realize who I am more so, I think about how dramatically it impacted me in my youth, and how it did lead to a lot of struggles, identity issues, poor mental health, self-esteem issues, because of so much that was bottled up. And I didn't feel comfortable to talk openly or share these things or dig deeper to understand them, because people weren't having those conversations. And so as I've gotten older, I thought, well, I want to be the one having this conversation, because there might be a 16, 17-year-old girl going through the same struggles who hears that and feels safe enough to open up, rather than spending the next 15 years bottling up who she really is, not being able to make deep connections, feeling lonely. And loneliness is dangerous. It leads to
absolutely
awful battles with our mental health. So I suppose it's wanting to have those conversations to help others to feel more confident in themselves when they are younger. The earlier we can realize who we are and feel comfortable to share that with the people around us, the better for our future, really.
And so did you feel awkward with your parents? Like, I mean, you sort of came out as bisexual on a podcast. Like, is that, or did they already know that? Or
I mean, I think they'd had inklings, simply because I'm lucky I did have a very, very good relationship with my mum growing up. So I did tell her everything. So, I told her things growing up, like, back in the day when I did have that experience at uni where at graduation we got to choose someone to kiss and it had been a girl. I told her, I was like, oh, I chose a girl, and, little things like that. I'm sure that my parents are very intelligent people. I'm sure they picked it up. And we do have a few family members across, like, distant relatives and things like that who are on different levels of the spectrum, or different positions of the spectrum. I'll put it that way, right? So I don't think it was news, I guess. But I suppose also the almost problem is I've always been in straight-facing relationships. I've always just only been in relationships with men. And so I think when it comes to bisexuality, a lot of people just think that it's a phase, especially for females. It's just a phase, and it's something that females just do. So it's not necessarily taken seriously. And for men, it's the negative stereotype of that is, well, no, you're actually just closeted gay. You're not bisexual, but you just don't want to say it. And so there's a lot of negative stereotypes around bisexuality where they're not accepted in the straight kind of space, but they're not accepted in the queer space either. So they're in their own little kind of like ostracized group.
That's I actually like guilty. You know what I mean? Like guilty. I just feel like, what's your beliefs around sex and relationships, and balancing that with this whole sexual revolution, because at the same time, it seems like you're still treating it quite, which is, I guess, what I believe is, I believe sex is quite a sacred thing. And, it seems like you're still quite coveted with your relationships and who you choose to spend time with.
Yeah.
But there's also this part of you that I guess could be perceived as quite out there and,
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, which is nice. I have a very big interest in just sexuality and sex for what it is for humans, because it's such a huge part of human experience. In connection, pleasure is such a huge part of human experience. And so it's something I think should be talked about more openly, because, we all do it, we all explore it, we all think about it. So it shouldn't be as taboo as it is. But I don't think it should be, personally, I don't think it should be used like we should, as females, objectify ourselves. People do. It's their choice. That's fine. That's cool. Things like OnlyFans are rampant these days, and it's all well and good to those who choose to do that. But for me, sexual experiences, play, connection with another human is something more, is intimate, and it is something that I do feel needs a lot of trust. And so personally, I don't think that, me is for the world to see in that way necessarily. I don't want to share myself to and with just anyone. But I am, I suppose, a little bit more open. This is something that I've talked about on my podcast pretty openly. My partner and I, we're not in an open relationship as most people would kind of deem it, but I wouldn't call us typically monogamous either. We see ourselves more like unlocked. So open being an open, unlocked door. Either party can just come and go as they please. They can do what they want. They're essentially almost two single people sort of together. That's not us, but we're also not monogamous, which would be a closed and locked door, which is we're solely with each other. That's that. And the only way that we're having any kind of connections with other humans is if that door is broken down. We're sort of a closed door, which has the capacity to open on occasion, which might mean if we want to have experiences together. So not alone, but with each other. My partner's my best friend, so we kind of like to do everything together in a sense, which might sound quite strange to people. I know it certainly does to people who are in monogamous relationships, because the thoughts of jealousy and all of that sort of stuff comes up, right? So in that way, I've been able to, I suppose, explore a little bit more of myself, because I've gone from one straight-facing relationship for 10 years, pretty much straight into another one for my whole life, but obviously have curiosities around the opposite sex. And so because I've got a partner who's equally minded, being able to make some connections with females and have different experiences and things like that have allowed me to explore that other part of myself without keeping it locked up, but in a very respectful way, because it obviously requires a lot of communication with my partner and things like that.
Has there been any hurdles so far?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course there has, because any kind of intimacy, whether it's romantic or within friendships or anything, it is always there's emotions involved. Humans are emotional beings. There has been jealousy, there has been arguments, there has been stress. So
give us an example, because I think this is something where, it's becoming more, I wouldn't say it's becoming more common, but I've heard of, I think every guy would love the idea of, having a partner that will occasionally bring home another girl, you know, if I'm just being, crude about it. But I think also that I'm in a position where as much as the idea of that might seem like a great idea, I can also see the reality of that. And for me, I don't think it would work, right?
Yeah.
Mainly because, obviously I don't think my wife would be, that into the idea. But aside from that, even if she was, I think I could anticipate issues going forward, right? Which, other things you mentioned, like jealousy and just, I don't know. I think there's a whole unexplored world there for me. And I think there'll be people out there toying with this idea.
Yeah.
What are some of the, let's get into it.
Yeah.
What are the actual issues that you've had, or what are some of the problems that can come up?
Well, I've definitely, jealousy was the big one. Before my partner and I, when I would say we were still typically monogamous at the beginning of our relationship, I had typical experiences of jealousy where we'd be at a party and he was talking to a girl and I got angry. I was like, don't even talk to that girl, things like that. And I came to realize that a lot of those feelings come from insecurity. So at a time where I was quite insecure within myself, who I was, what I was offering to the relationship, the strength of the relationship at the time, that's where a lot of those feelings came out. It did take a lot of self-work to realize, okay, where is this feeling coming from? Jealousy is not inherently bad. It is trying to tell us something, which was I was feeling insecure in myself and felt like I wasn't my best self in that time of our life. I wasn't looking after myself. This was kind of around the COVID time. So I'd gained a lot of weight. Yeah. I was unhealthy. So
play a lot of Fortnite.
Oh my God. Right. Exactly. That's right. Yeah, exactly. It was not a normal time at all. So I got my shit together and basically looked after myself, which made me feel better in my own skin, which did help to take away part of those feelings of jealousy. And then it involved just a lot of communication in the relationship. So in order for any of this type of stuff to work, because you're right, there's the stereotype that many men would be like, that would be fantastic. Then you think about the actual work involved, constant communication, ongoing, like complete trust. So my partner and I, we have, and ever since we first started dating, we have the same phone passcodes to get into the phones. And the only reason that happened was because I'm terrible with numbers. I could never remember. And whenever Jack, my partner, was cooking a recipe or something and wanted me to open his phone, I couldn't remember the passcode. So he just changed it to the same as mine for the sake of ease. And it's just stayed that way. So, complete access to each other's private lives if we want to, but we have no interest in snooping around because we tell each other everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything, things that we've not told anyone else, deep, dark secrets, desires, thoughts. And if there isn't that capacity to be able to have those conversations in a relationship, well, there's, where there's hidden thoughts, feelings, and desires, that's going to come out in some way. So to be able to have the capacity to bring another person in some way, whether it be for just an experience or in the case of some people, they have ongoing relationships with others, there's got to be so much trust and communication constantly. So we had to learn to navigate that at the beginning, which was, we went through a phase of time, and this is something my partner has shared as well, where he was seeing another girl at the same time. So he realized he's poly, so was kind of exploring that. And I said, go, do it, explore that avenue. It doesn't bother me whatsoever, which I thought, but jealousy did come up. There was a lot of that. And I realized it was the fears of, he's going to like this person more. He's going to leave me. What am I going to do if I get abandoned? And so working through all those feelings and realizing he's not actually going anywhere. He's not actually going to leave. He's not actually going to abandon. This is your choice. You told him to do this. And he's made it very clear we could stop at any time if I say so. I realized I was the one in control. I was the one in, I kind of had the power in the situation, which took the jealousy away because it was like, well, he's not going anywhere. This is absolutely fine. Why do you need to feel jealous of this person? It created, have you heard of compersion? So compersion is it's the feeling of joy we get.
It's not a country near Egypt, is it?
It sounds like it, doesn't it? No, it's quite simply the feeling of when you see someone else happy, you get joy. So if you give someone a gift and they love it, you feel joy. But compersion in that sense is, I saw the joy that he would have when he would go out and they'd go for a walk and a coffee and he'd come home and be all excited and talking and things like that. Or like we all went out to dinner and the joy and happiness in the conversation. And jealousy was replaced with that feeling of compersion, which was just, oh, I'm loving seeing this human that I love connecting with another human, and it's not taking away from me. And that was the point. I was losing nothing in that whole experience. It was just he was experiencing more connection with someone. So yeah, it does take a lot of work. It sounds so simple like that, but it was months and months of work, communication, bad times, fights, like, yeah.
It doesn't sound simple. Yeah. Like, I think it sounds, quite, I guess, it's not for everyone. I can see that. With that, how do you anticipate that moving forward, Because now if you've met a guy that you're potentially see a long-term future with, is that something that you would then maybe close up, or is it something that, have you thought about that, or am I getting too far ahead here?
No, we've had all those conversations, and I think that's the important thing. Like, you have to know exactly what you're doing, the direction you want it to go, and why you're doing it. That's a lot of people fall into the trap of going down these realms when something's missing from the relationship. And that's when it's dangerous. That's when it's bad because something's missing that you're not working on. And, like you said before, the example of the dad coming home with a present for one child, but not the other. Those are the moments where you do realize what's missing. So if there's jealousy that comes up, oh, you took her out on a date and you had a great time and I don't feel happy, I'm angry. Well, maybe that's because I feel like I'm missing that. I need that more. I need you to take me out on dates more. You bought her a present, but not me. Well, I want you to buy me gifts more. So it's like, that's where you start to realize what is missing within your relationship so that you can get those needs and desires met. So by that same kind of token, what do we both want out of this? Where do we see our life going? What path is what's the path ahead? And we've had some difficult conversations of like, well, what would happen if we had different opinions? What if I decided that I wanted to close the relationship up, or he did and the other didn't? And I guess we both kind of agreed, like, if we got to a place in the future where we were on different pages, we would have the conversation then and decide what we were going to do
just
from
talk
there.
About it. Yeah. I think the key with all what you're saying is communication is king,
Yeah.
Obviously, what a rock star, it's hard enough keeping one woman happy, so I don't know why any man would want to complicate that, but
Literally.
Good on him.
He said, do you know what? I don't think he'll ever do it again for that reason. He's just like, it's not worth the stress.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of stress. Yeah, but no, good. That's cool. It's good to be able to talk about this stuff. Obviously, I mean, these are all new age, new wave. These things weren't around 10 years ago. You know? So with I guess. You look at your mentors and you look at the goals and you look at how you run and prepare and how you have to be quite organized and militant in the way you go about preparing for comps and dieting and all that. I mean, you know how to get results, right? That's what I was thinking. Like, I love someone who actually has experience with getting results, because I do it in business and I do it in all sorts of different aspects of my life when I follow a program. But I also have people that that mentor me or that I follow, or they lead by example. So you've talked about what you're doing with your physical and, working in the gym space and the health space. What about, like, are there mentors or are there people or are there role models that you look up to who are, I guess, further down the line? Are there people that you have as heroes in your life that are not in that space? Not
in the competing space or not in the fitness space?
Well, just just that are outside the box, I guess. Like, who do you look up to?
That's a great question. Oh, I look up to a lot of people within my space, to be honest. Like, my coach is one of them. He's someone I do look up to because of his integrity and his honesty. People that are outside of the space, though. That's a great question. I don't know if I would necessarily say I have idols or people that I idealize outside of it, but there's people who are traveling down paths that I really respect. So, for example, a woman within, she's in like the, I suppose you'd say sexual education space, and she's very big on educating women, empowering women, helping educate around relationships. She does a lot of workshops. She does a lot of really valuable content to help people to be able to tap deeper into understanding relationships. And like, I really respect that. I think that's definitely what is needed, more of those conversations to help people foster better, stronger relationships, rather than what we unfortunately do have, which is people, the blind leading the blind, basically.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And who's that?
Eleanor Hadley, her name is. She's.
Oh, I know her.
Do you actually? She's wonderful.
Yeah. I've actually was in a conversation with her about doing a podcast.
Oh, beautiful. She's a beautiful human, just inside and out. She's such a gorgeous human, and what she does, I think, is so wonderful. So, there
great.
you go.
Yeah, there you go. That's funny that she's come up twice now in my another podcast guest mentioned her.
There you go.
I'll have to hit her up again.
You will.
Yeah, that's
will.
great. What about in your family? Are there people that have done like that you, I guess, look up to in your family? Do you have good relationships with, your parents and grandparents and things like that? Is there?
Yeah, I do. I unfortunately didn't get to know my extended family very much growing up. My mum and dad moved out to Australia when I was, when they were 20, and it was just them. So the rest of my family were all over in England. And so I think I've met them all only a few times in my life, unfortunately. So we never got to foster really strong relationships. But my parents, I do look up to a lot, because they did come out here with nothing, really.
Yeah.
No money, no job, they knew no one. And they...
From England?
From England. Yeah. When they were very young, and they managed to raise 4 kids with just one parent working and get themselves by. And I think what I was taught growing up is something I do respect from my dad, which is just hard work. Like, nothing's given to you, you work for it, basically. And from my mum is one of the toughest people I know. She's one of the strongest people in the world I know, and she will face anything thrown at her, and she'll just deal with it. And I love that. She doesn't stress. She's not anxious. She just deals with it. So I do really respect them for that. Yeah.
Well, I think there we've found some mentors that are outside the health and fitness space.
Yeah, there we go. I guess I've never just thought about it like that, but I suppose most of us look up to our parents if we've got good relationships with them. Yeah.
And I guess, look, moving forward, what do you think is going to play out with regards to, we talked about feminism, we talked about the male and female roles. Like, where do you think all that's heading? Do you think it's going to turn back? Are people starting to switch again? Are they sort of starting to get back to more traditional, or are they moving more further away from the center, or is there something else happening?
I think it's going to have to get so much worse before it gets better, in the sense that it's us versus them at the moment in so many ways. It is men versus women. And if you are a man that supports women, you're the enemy. And if you're a female that supports men, you're the enemy. You're what do they say on social media? Like a pick me or something like that, right? So it's very, there's a lot of conflict between the sexes and a lot of anger, just unnecessary anger. So I think we're going to have to get to a point where it all comes to a head, and we realize that it's that same thing. Like, something big has to occur before real positive change is going to take place. And
well, I think we're both each other's solutions, really. Like, it's kind of, like women letting men be men and understanding what men are about and what makes them tick. Obviously generalizing again, because, not every man is the same.
Yeah.
And I think men really need to, I think just, with the problem with social media is men are gawking at women rather than and listening to them. And that's partially their fault. But I also think, I don't know what your thoughts on pornography are, but I think that, like, what used to be quite a little cheeky thing in a magazine at the back of a sort of newsagent, or maybe under your mattress somewhere, is now something that's, carried around and I think that is also shaping a lot of young men's and women's, but I think predominantly men's, view of women.
Yeah.
So I think there's a massive misunderstanding. Like, we're both on 2 different pages.
Yeah. But it's also shaping how females think they need to behave around men. You hear, and unfortunately, it's absolutely devastating. But girls who are so young doing things that they're really not ready for because they've seen it or heard about it from porn, and they're like, well, that's what men want. And men obviously watching porn, seeing what they see, thinking, well, that's how you treat women. And so you're right, they're kind of two different pages running alongside each other, both missing the point.
Yeah.
And
But I thought that's what you wanted. I thought that's what you wanted.
yes, literally. And they're not being taught to talk. Why don't we tell each other what we want? But that is not occurring.
Yeah, that's why what you said before, communication is the key. And I think, it's just, it's just kind of going, it's all going a little bit sort of wild at the moment. And I really think that it's sort of like this slippery slope with Instagram and Snapchat and these sort of apps, and I think they're the gateway now to putting those sexual thoughts in young kids' heads and then having porn right there. You know what I mean? And I think like we were saying before, getting back in communication with one another and having conversations like this where, people get the opportunity to actually just hear what a girl has to say, regardless of, what they might perceive. The truth is that men and women are wired very differently, and it's not a bad thing,
It's not a bad thing. There's a reason why. It's evolutionary. We kind of need to be, because we have different roles and purposes. But I think the issue is we don't know necessarily how to communicate with each other because we communicate so differently. So men and women, they struggle to create the friendship aspect, which would solve everything,
Which, let's just finish on that subject then. So men and women, can they be friends?
I mean, I like to think they could, but it takes, again, it all comes back to the same thing. It takes a man and a female who are very self-aware, very self-reflective, and very able to communicate to be able to have that relationship. People that can be blunt, honest, here's my intentions, here's my thoughts, here's who I am, and to keep that kind of constantly up on the surface level. Yeah, I think they could, but we aren't like that.
I think there's always a but with it though, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think they'll never be like, I don't see me going camping with a girl anytime soon, and sitting around the fireplace and drinking a few beers. Like, there's always going to be a but.
Yes.
I think that yes, and I think it's actually a good thing if men are have women friends, because as we just discussed, like there's such a disconnect between the sexes, and I think it's actually, funnily enough, that we have so much more avenues for communication, and what we were saying before, but like the statistics speak to the fact that, anxiety rates are through the roof, both male and female. There's less sex actually happening.
Yeah.
There's, obesity issues. There's, so the glitz and glamour of your Instagram feed is not reality, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we all tell ourselves that, but it's hard to not still feel that your life is terrible.
Yeah.
Every time you open that app. But hopefully, people can solve it, more communication.
Yes, I think that's the key. Exactly.
Yeah. How are you feeling? We're going to wrap it up?
Yeah. No, feeling good. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. That was a good chat. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, me too. Some really interesting questions in there, actually. It was good.
Yeah, cool. All right. I'll kill the mics, but so we can just end it off there.